So now that we have refactored our ES5 plain JavaScript constructor function over to a class of cart, what I want to do is kind of just pause on this object-oriented practices just for now in this video, and we want to discuss the concept of property initialization, which is exactly the syntax that we're using here. Now, in JavaScript, when we are dealing with classes, we can have this new keyword. So, for example, we can also have things such as new array. If, for example, we were to use this new array constructor, we can in fact compose a new array. However, we also have the ability to reference this array object without the new keyword, which then gives us all these methods such as from or perhaps is array, which we've already checked out as well. Now, because we can do this instantly without calling this new keyword, this is known as a static property. It's static because we don't need to create a new instance of the array. So when we're actually dealing with our constant of cart, this is an instance of our cart constructor. So everything here is pretty dynamic. It's not static. We're dealing with prototype properties. Now, what I want to talk about is this static keyword first, and then we'll talk about these properties and how to initialize them. Now, at the moment, you can see that we have our cart and it has our items, and the prototype has our add and remove. So we can see those nice and cleanly. We also have this constructor, which then contains our constructor logic. Now, at the moment, we are using an object freeze when we construct our cart. However, we have the complete ability to do something like this, where we say name equals, and we'll just call it my cart. So now when we save things out, because we are logging our cart with the lowercase, we are in fact logging out the instance. So this is a new instance. It's not a static property, but it allows us to then see this name such as my cart. And we also have our items array that we've been dealing with as well. Now, this syntax is enabled by our Babel plugin. So here we have this .babelrc, which is a hidden file, and I've set these up using the proposal of class properties. So this will be landing in JavaScript soon, as will this private method. These are very mature APIs. However, we can start using them now by using our Babel plugins. So from the top, we have our class properties. Now over here, what I've prepared is the Babel documentation, which then shows you exactly what it does. So this is called the property initializer syntax, and that's exactly what we've been using here. And we've just seen that when we call the new keyword, we can then access those. Now we also have the ability to use the static class properties. So before we go any further, let's go back to our code, and we're going to change this over to static and hit save. So now once we go to our console, we can try open things up. It's not in the proto, it's not in the items, it's not anywhere to be seen. That's because we are talking to the instance of our cart. So if we do a quick console log above, and we can say cart with the uppercase, we want to just reference that .name quickly. We can then have the strings printed out of my cart. So here we're just referencing the static class, the static function. We're not invoking a new instance like we are down here. So this is kind of your array.isArray equivalent. And down here we have things such as cart.add, which is pretty much your equivalent to doing something like array.filter. Filter being the prototype method, as is our add and remove. So that's the difference between a static and a dynamic property. Here we're using static. And with ES6 classes, we can also use this property initializer syntax, whether it's static or not, and give a default value inside of here. If we do want to reassign, we can also do things in here. Now, static properties you might want to use, you might not want to use. However, there is one really nice feature, which also is in our Babel RC file, and it's this plugin proposal for private methods. So here we have the plugin proposal private methods. So what does this allow us to do? Let's have a look at our Babel example inside the window. So here we've got a class of counter. This is like a web component, which is extending the HTML element. But you can see that the hash has made its way into JavaScript. So what this in fact means is that we are declaring and using a private property or a method. So this allows us to use things such as get. It allows us to use things such as set, which we'll also come on to in the next few videos. I really like setters and getters. But essentially, when we want to create something which is entirely private, because JavaScript until now did not have what we call true private variables, we can use this new hash syntax. So everything you're learning in here is very modern, it's very up to date, and we're using Babel to transform those new features for us. So where do we want to use it? It might be a good idea to use it on our items, because here we have our cart, and at the moment we've seen our items. Now it might be that we are in fact freezing it, so we know that nobody can change things outside. However, we might want to make it 100% and completely inaccessible. So what I'm going to do is take our items up here, and I'm just going to prefix this with a hash. We can then select our this.items and also add the same prefix as well. So what's going to happen here is Babel is going to transform this into a private property. So we're not going to actually see it anymore being part of our cart class. So we're not going to see it anymore. It's not going to live on the prototype. It's going to live somewhere deep down in our JavaScript bundle, and we're not going to be allowed to touch it. And it cleverly uses things such as JavaScript closures to, in fact, hide those variables for us. So let's save this out and see it working in the console. We can expand our cart, and it pretty much looks like an empty object. If we expand the prototype, we can see add and remove. Now, underneath the hood, JavaScript is keeping up to date our items. However, we can't really see it. What we could do, for example, is take this and we could add a quick console log. We can save things out, and you can see that we have that this.items on line 11, which is being logged out. So we do know, in fact, that this.items does exist inside of our class. However, it is no longer available on our public object. And it's an important thing to remember that every single thing in JavaScript, unless we scope it, will almost be 100% public. We used to do things such as an underscore prefix to say, oh, hey, I'm intending this variable to be private, so please don't touch this variable, don't use it. And this kind of led to this new syntax of using this hash, which would then give us true private variables in JavaScript. So this is an amazing feature that's been added, and I think that we can find some really nice use cases for maintaining private state on a class with relative simplicity. In the video, we've also discussed these property initializers. We also have this ability to use a static property, which will not be available to us on an instance, much like array.isArray, where we logged out our cart name. And then we've looked at our instance methods, which exists on the prototype, which you could look at, for example, array.filter. We don't use this capital array. We're actually using the array prototype, which then exposes .filter to us in the exact same way that .add is available to us because it is on the prototype. So that's it for this video. We've discussed our Babel setup. We've looked at this class properties. We've looked at private methods. And these are two really nice features that we can begin using today in our JavaScript, which are very future facing. And I love these changes to object-oriented programming. Now, in the next lesson, what we're going to do is look at those setters and getters, which I just mentioned that we had in our Babel documentation, where we've got a private getter and a private setter. But let's not spoil that and skip ahead. That's it for this lesson, and I'll see you in the next video where we're going to do something really cool with our object freezing and our state management using setters and getters.